Mental health affects different communities in different ways. This research seems to suggest that immigrant communities are disproportionately affected by mental ill health. Birmingham is a city that's history is built on immigration. This particular film looks at that issue, the links between mental health, immigration and immigrant communities within Birmingham. Birmingham is a city built historically on immigration. In the modern era, Birmingham has various different ethnic groups, sometimes described as ethnic minority groups. It has a significant Asian population, a significant Afro-Caribbean population, and in more recent years there's been immigration from Eastern Europe and even more recently from Somalia. So what are the experiences of people from these different communities of mental health in Birmingham?
One of the significant effects of industrialisation and urbanisation was the decline of the extended family. So when people lived in small towns or in the countryside, there was much more likelihood that there would be family support for members who were mentally ill. They were more likely to remain with their family. As families extended families gradually broke up, with people moving to cities, people became detached from their families. They were more likely to be socially isolated, or if they had a family, it would only be a very small family compared to what they were used to. So there was less support available for people, and therefore more likelihood that they would end up in an institution.
You'll know the arguments about mental illness being more common in people of very low social class. People from certain ethnic minorities, it seems that schizophrenia and certain psychoses are more common. And the social theories behind that now really is the state of disadvantage within the society of that person, psychological disadvantage, not just, and every sort of disadvantage really.
People who'd migrated within the country, who migrated from the country to the town or from small town to the city, were more liable to be admitted to an asylum. Yeah, that's certainly the case. There's also been research regarding immigrants. There's currently a big project been taking place regarding Irish immigrants into Lancashire, which clearly has demonstrated that the rate of admission among Irish immigrants was well above that for native-born. There's been similar research on Irish people in Canada, Australia and New Zealand, all of which shows the same thing, much higher rates of asylum admission than for other groups of people.
Birmingham, 300 to 400 years ago was a little village. It wasn't the main town. Towns like Lichfield, Stafford, Stratford-on-Avon, these were the Midland towns. Whereas Birmingham didn't exist. The Industrial Revolution created Birmingham, so people had to travel from all parts of the UK to get employment, to create the population.
I myself, some years ago, did look at asylum admissions of Jewish people in Birmingham, Manchester and Liverpool in the 19th century. Similar sort of patterns seem to emerge really, higher admission rates, but also particular difficulties within the asylum in terms of how the asylum authorities or how treated them, because they didn't really understand the culture, and there's indications that things that people said that had strong cultural resonance were maybe misunderstood and interpreted as a sign of their madness. I came across instances of Jewish people refusing to eat the food. This was interpreted as a sign of their melancholia, or of them having delusional ideas about food, when in fact it was more likely to do with the fact that the food wasn't kosher.
Birmingham had to look outside itself for people to fill the jobs that were being created. Birmingham was the industrial heartland of the UK, the place of where the car industry was, as well as the the gun industry and engineering, and it needed people from all over the world to actually fill employment. So you've had then the Pakistani community, the Bangladeshi community, right up to the most recent communities like the Polish community, the Romanians, the Somali communities, who've actually, built on that long-term tradition. So when we talk about mental health in Birmingham, we have to talk about that journey of probably about 40 different main countries of origin forming one, and the emotional well-being of Birmingham is an intercultural one.
My father was from Dublin. He worked in the markets there. His family had street stalls. But I actually am a fellow traveller. I had a big breakdown in 2003. At the time I was a city councillor in Birmingham City. I was a senior steward in the car industry. It just became too much. The kettle lid blew, and I had a breakdown which led me to being sectioned twice.
One of the main differences was like culture shock and culture changes, differences in culture. When I arrived in Scotland, whereas there was a big culture shock here, it was even bigger in Scotland, you see, because I think I spent a year here in Birmingham, and when I got to Scotland, it was like a bigger culture shock because there was even fewer people of colour in Scotland, kind of thing, which was not an issue because I'd sort of thought about myself, I got used to it at that point in time.
When I first went into Hargrove, it was still in the old workhouse type scenario. They had wards, and the only thing separated you from the next person was a curtain, and there's no privacy. There's people in with you who were very ill. Held me back a while, I think, because I wasn't able to express what I was going through.
When you look at the people that have ended up in institutions or into hospital through mental illness, it's been very related to the difficulties that they've had in their own communities.
When I was coming here, personally, we were coming through the airport, I experienced a lot of racism from when I was coming from Yemen. A lot of racism, a lot of assault, verbal and physical. As a child, that stays with you. And like, if someone says to me now, go back to Yemen, I would never go, because of that experience I had. Within
Scotland, there was also different kind of problems that I was experiencing at that time. The main thing was that I was quite isolated. I lived just outside of Glasgow, like a good 15 miles away. And I was quite sure at one point in time I was like the only black person within like 10 to 20 miles radius kind of thing. I was having two extremes. There were people who had never seen a black person before, and there were people, most of them had never seen a black person, but the way they interacted with you was, different. Some of them, wanted to know more about black people in a nice, pleasant way, but others were not so nice, and it was very, very difficult at points. I had so many experiences because I had experiences whereby I would say find my car scratched, my tires flattened on a weekly basis kind of thing, or my house door kicked in kind of thing, I'd call the police and, they would try and help, but, it was quite difficult to see who had done this kind of thing. And I had name calling, the general name calling in the streets kind of thing,
The racism that the African Caribbean community had, the Pakistani community, the Bangladeshi community, affected that community and therefore affected their mental health. So you have a history of over-representation of African Caribbean men within the mental health system. in the UK, but particularly in Birmingham, because that's where you've had a large African Caribbean community. So the history of mental health is the history of migration.
I'm Somali and I'm Muslim, so in terms of mental health in the Somali community is not discussed at all. It's not seen as sort of depression, anxiety and all that is not seen as anything really.
As much as the mental health stigma is slowly starting to be broken, it's still very much there within the Asian communities and very much there in the Bengali communities. So it's like there's no such thing as mental health. There's just something wrong with you. There's not an understanding of mental health issues.
It's not perceived in a good way unless you've gone through it. You know, people will probably think you're mad, or they'll think they won't. I know for definite. I have got. There's different types of people that I know within my community, and I'm talking about the Asian community, and there's some people have been quite supportive. It's because they went through depression when they had their child and they were quite supportive. But then there are some that say snap out of it, and they did say that to me when I was going through depression. Well, just snap out of it. What's wrong? You know, you're fine, you're healthy, you've got a baby on the way, so be excited. But I couldn't be excited, you know, and that wasn't my fault.
There was an incident. Basically, I went to my principal after the night after this incident, and I just literally said, I'm going home. I'm going to my, I'm leaving basically to my, and at that point of saying that, I literally just broke down and kind of started crying, You see, because at that point in time, I was just going to drop everything, just leave everything, because I'd just had enough. And, I think I'd kind of reached a breaking point at that point in time.
There's a famous quote, they say you're either mad or you're not. So there's no sort of mental health or people that suffer from depression a long time or anything like that. So when I have Somali clients and I try to explain to them or ask them if they're suffering from such diagnosis or health issues, they say no, we haven't got any of those issues, but they do. It surfaces up at the end or during our support plan or as long as I'm with them, and I try to tell them, to inform them and sort of give them information, useful information, how to deal with it without stigmatizing them or saying that you've suffered from this and that, because they don't want the stigma of the community. So I think I personally sort of tell them indirectly, or sort of try to help them indirectly without sort of signaling out what they have.
We're looking at it from my client's point of view. They can't talk to family members about their problems because they don't have that psychological understanding of what it is. So if they could talk to somebody who would understand it, they can actually think, well, there's not something wrong with, I have a mental health problem, and they would feel a little bit more at ease knowing, it is normal, it's a normal mental health disorder, and I'm not crazy kind of thing. So it is important, because a lot of my clients, they found their family brush away the problems, like, no, it doesn't really exist. So even if they did try to verbalize what's wrong with them, then it's not really acknowledged. So it makes it a lot worse. So, building up that confidence to say something and then nobody acknowledging it, that's really tough for them.
Someone has been in war for 20 years, so people have experienced all sorts, have seen all sorts. So it's post-traumatic stress mainly, and goes without treated. People that are anxious, hearing voices, thinking that someone has a gun and wants to kill them, and sort of all that sort of builds up and is still with them, even if they're here. I have clients that are scared of fireworks, scared of like banging noise or like loud noise because of the trauma they suffered, and they don't try to acknowledge it or get help for it, because they think it's something that is going to go away. So trying to help them understand, help them get help, get support, it's very, very important. And when they do, they realize, and then they tell those people that are around them to get the same help.
Situations are very, need to be looked at. And Birmingham has a huge history of migrants from war, from coming here because of safety. The Indian and Pakistani communities, the Bangladeshi communities, very much came from the separation, the creation of those countries after the Second World War. People came here to get jobs, but they also came here for safety. The new communities, the Somali community, came out of a war zone. The Zimbabwean community came out of conflict within that country, the Congo. So you have a lot of hidden trauma within that. If you look at the white community and you look at very poor outer estates of Birmingham, they're the recruitment ground for soldiers. That's where the army gets their recruits. So those communities are now getting veterans going back into those communities that have the trauma of Afghanistan and Iraq and previous sort of wars before that.
It wasn't a good experience. I had counselling and I was told by my counsellor that I was uncounselable. I was referred to a psychiatrist initially who said, just go home and pray and you'll feel better. That's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted somebody to say, well, yeah, we understand what's going on for you.
It all started when I became a carer for my dad, a full-time carer. And I started feeling down. I felt like I felt quite isolated because I was isolated. I was at home taking care of my dad all the time. This was in 2007. And it just got worse, and I ended up seeing the doctor about it, and they said that I had depression. And my first feeling was of shock. I was shocked because I have been I'm studying psychology at the same time in my final year of my degree, and I didn't realise I could have depression because I thought I'd know the ins and outs of it to prevent something like that, but I didn't see it coming.
I think most Somalis feel that they don't belong and that they hope to go back one day, but the fact that they settle down and they're working here and going to school here shows that that might not happen, but the fact that they want to go back shows that they're not completely comfortable or completely accept the whole British life living here idea, and that doesn't help their mental health. They're always on edge, always sort of floating, a bit of a nomad, wanting to move on. So that's why a lot of Somalis that I've seen, or even in my personal life, they've travelled from Holland, then to Sweden, then to Britain, and then so on and so forth. And being unsettled like that doesn't help. If they're suffering from mental issues, it doesn't help. They need long-term stability and care and sort of support, and they don't receive that. The route that they come is very difficult. They have to sort of do it illegally at the beginning, and those have devastating effects. Some people die, while the people you're traveling with, some of them might die, and they might be your relatives or your mother or your father, and experiencing that just keeps all those experiences and just builds up.
Counselling is very white middle class. It doesn't teach you how to counsel in languages. It doesn't teach you how to, it doesn't teach you how to. It doesn't teach you how to translate the language, so it's all working on foot and it's all learning as you go along. The difference between the conventional counselling and the counselling that I certainly, in my experience, have offered is that it's not just as simple as sitting there and listening to what somebody's got to say, because the Asian culture doesn't have room for that. It wants that engagement, it wants that interactiveness. So if you're going to sit there and paraphrase and reflect, it's going to sound a little bit dumb.
I got married, then I got divorced, and after my divorce, I had a really, really bad time. I was really low and I was really depressed. I didn't feel like I was pregnant at the same time. Didn't feel much of a bond with my baby. People said, well, you should, why don't you talk to your baby? Well, I didn't want to talk to my baby.
I certainly think that, you know, there needs to be more awareness, and I think it needs to take into consideration, especially for those that can't speak English, that a bulk of your sessions are going to be spent explaining what counselling is and what the benefits of counselling are.
Coming from a culture to a completely different culture and thinking what you believed was right to different beliefs and views and everything, it's hard to take into account. It's hard to sort of open your mind to it and accept it. You feel threatened, directly or indirectly. You feel that you don't belong.
I certainly feel there has been a stigma, but certainly through my own work, you know, I see a good proportion of men coming and their needs are just as great as a woman's needs are. And again, yes, there is that, you know, you break a barrier, but a different type of barrier there, you know, and again, you know, trust and confidentiality are two key things. I mean, they are with any cultures, but within Asian cultures, because everybody knows everybody and somebody's, you know, kind of got links within the community, you know, and it could be something as simple as if they're coming in on a regular basis to a particular spot, somebody's going to say, well, I see you going there every week, why do you go there every week? So it's, confidentiality isn't just in terms of like what information I'm going to leak out, it's about where they're coming, and so it's all those kind of factors. We certainly see a lot of disharmony in marriages now, financial issues. We've also seen a lot of adults that have experienced childhood sexual abuse that have come through the door. Anxiety, depression.
You can't help how you look or what colour you are, or you know who your parents are, or what your ethnicity is. But the fact that people sort of place themselves better than you or higher than you, and you can't help it, and you get it not from the kids only, from the teachers, from your neighbours, from everybody around you, was very hard. We had to learn to cope with it or to fight it off.
When he was born, I still didn't have a bond, and my health visitor realised that I had depression, and she wanted to do something about it to get me some support. But some relatives and some family friends around me, the senior members of the families, they discouraged me from getting help. I realised that I can't cope like this. I want to have a bond with my baby. So I spoke to the health visitor and she referred me to the mother and baby unit, which is the Barbary, attached to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And over there they diagnosed me with bipolar as well. You know, so that kind of made sense. I could see why I was having highs and why I was having lows over the years. So they diagnosed me with bipolar and they gave me a lot of support. I started on medication, and I'm happy I started on medication because it's all under control now, you know. So whereas before I thought I couldn't talk about my mental health issues when I came out of hospital, because I was in hospital for a month, and then I would come home and go back and come home and go back until they felt I was okay to be discharged, and they discharged me. But for me, it was one of the best experiences I had. Being in hospital was one of the best experiences I had. I met a lot of mothers there that were in the same situation. We got a lot of help, and we just realised we were normal. You know, it doesn't mean if you've got a mental health issue you're not normal. You are normal. You just need to know how to control it, basically.